For my curriculum tool, I chose to implement an interactive MyPlate. And I thought this MyPlate would be beneficial to my community in particular because I wanted an easy and fun way to review the parts of the recipe, to talk about balance, and to also reiterate all the information that we covered over the 6 weeks. I originally made my poster to be implemented each week, but it turned out I was only able to implement it on the 6th week as a review, and it actually worked really well as a review piece, so I was really impressed with that, and it could also be used as a review tool if someone else were using it in the future. As far as the parts of my plate, I just created a larger than life my plate. So I have the fruits up here, vegetables, grains, protein, and then finally the dairy at the top right hand side of the poster. And then I also added 3 main ideas that I wanted my classroom to gain after the 6 weeks with us. So the 3 of those that I wanted to really go over in depth is reading the label. So I have my funny little eyeballs with the label, and then I have the pieces of the grain that we talked about, as well as walking the perimeter over here, which I thought was one of the biggest things that we got from CMAT's tour. So to use my MyPlate poster, all you need is the poster itself. You should try to store the poster flat so it doesn't get warped and so things don't start falling off of it. And you also need the printed pieces of the recipe that you used. And for this example, we used broccoli cheddar pasta and fruit smoothies. So I have all the big, large idea ingredients printed out and laminated so that they're easily can be stuck on. And then at the end of the day, pull them off and you can reuse the tool over and over. So for the example to show you how it works, I'm going to use the whole grain pasta that we had in the pasta. So you would call up a student and they would come and you would say, okay, where does this go in the MyPlate? And hopefully they would say the grains. So you would have them stick it on the grains. And as they go back to their seat, you'd open it up to the whole classroom. So you would say, when we go to the pasta aisle, what do we look for? And hopefully this would kind of jiggle their brains to start thinking along the lines of whole grain. And so hopefully somebody would say whole grains. And then you could expand on this until you got to the final point. And this can take as much time or as little time as you need it. You can also make it as advanced as you want it or as easy as you need it to be. So in this case, you could talk about, we look at whole grains. How do we identify something as a whole grain? Hopefully they would say the first ingredient, which goes back to our nutrition label. Then you could move into why do are whole grains better for us? So you could talk about fullness and the pieces of the whole grain. And hopefully you had enough time to do this for each part of the recipe. And if you were short on time, it's very easy to take out pieces of the recipe. If you had an advanced group, you could talk about what's missing, what could be added, what could be replaced, anything like that. You could also talk about ways to improve the recipe, have everyone discuss the parts of the recipe that they did. So if someone chopped the bananas, you could get them to tell the class about how they chopped the bananas. So there's really limitless ways to use the MyPlate, and it can be adapted for each community. As far as when I implemented it, a problem that I ran into was the class kind of got distracted a little bit. So the way that I overcame that was I started calling on people in particular to answer my questions. Like if someone had their head down on the table, I would call on them to ask, when we go to the whole grain aisle, how do we figure out something's a whole grain? And I would have them answer that to keep them more involved. But overall, it went really well. My kids were really excited about it in the classroom, so I hope you have the same luck if you use this in the future classroom. Thanks.